ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। वक्रतुण्डमहाकाय सूर्यकोटि समप्रभ निर्विघ्नं कुरु मे देव सर्वकार्येषु सर्वदा। सरस्वती नमस्तुभ्यं वरदे कामरूपिणि विद्यारम्भं करिष्यामि सिद्धिर्भवतु मे सदा। समस्तजनकल्याणे निरतं करुणामयं नमामि चिन्मयं देवं सद्गुरुं ब्रह्मविद्वरम्। मूकं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे परमानन्दमाधवम् परमानन्दमाधवम्। We will do Gita Dhyanam. ॐ पार्थाय प्रतिबोधितां भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीम् अष्टादशाध्यायिनीम् अम्ब त्वामनुसन्दधामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणीम् नमोऽस्तु ते व्यासविशालबुद्धे फुल्लारविन्दायतपत्रनेत्र येन त्वया भारततैलपूर्णः प्रज्वालितो ज्ञानमयः प्रदीपः प्रपन्नपारिजाताय स्तोत्रवेत्रैकपाणये ज्ञानमुद्राय कृष्णाय गीतामृतदुहे नमः। सर्वोपनिषदो गावः दोग्धा गोपालनन्दनः पार्थो वत्सः सुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत्। वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुं। भीष्मद्रोणतटा जयद्रथजला गान्धारनीलोत्पला शल्यग्राहवती कृपेण वहनी कर्णेन वेलाकुला अश्वत्थामविकर्णघोरमकरा दुर्योधनावर्तिनी सोत्तीर्णा खलु पाण्डवैरणनदी कैवर्तकः केशवः पाराशर्यवचः सरोजममलं गीतार्थगन्धोत्कटं नानाख्यानककेसरं हरिकथा सम्बोधना बोधितम्। लोके सज्जन षट्पदैरहरहः पेपीयमानं मुदा भूयात् भारत पङ्कजं कलिमल प्रध्वंसिन श्रेयसे मूकं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे परमानन्दमाधवम् यं ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्ररुद्रमरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्यैस्तवैः वेदैः साङ्गपतक्रमोपनिषदैः गायन्ति यं सामगाः ध्यानावस्थिततद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनः यस्यान्तं न विदुः सुरासुरगणाः देवाय तस्मै नमः देवाय तस्मै नमः All right, let us read the verses that we have covered. So we will read from verse 38. Okay. Verse 38, and we talked until verse 44. So we will read those. All right. यद्यपेतेन पश्यन्ति लोभोपहत चेतसः कुलक्षयकृतं दोषं मित्रद्रोहे च पातकं कथं न ज्ञेयमस्माभिः पापादस्मान् निवर्तितुं कुलक्षयकृतं दोषं प्रपश्यद्भिर्जनार्दन कुलक्षये प्रणश्यन्ति कुलधर्माः सनातनाः धर्मे नष्टे कुलं कृत्स्नम् अधर्मोऽभिभवत्युत अधर्माभिभवत् कृष्ण प्रदुष्यन्ति कुलस्त्रियः स्त्रीषु दुष्टासु वार्ष्णेय जायते वर्णसङ्करः संकरो नरकायैव कुलघ्नानां कुलस्य च पतन्ति पितरो ह्येषां लुप्तपिण्डोदकक्रियाः दोषैरेतैः कुलघ्नानां वर्णसङ्करकारकैः उत्साद्यन्ते जातिधर्माः कुलधर्माश्च शाश्वताः उत्सन्नकुलधर्माणां मनुष्याणां जनार्दन नरके नियतं वासः भवतीत्यनुशुश्रुमा. Okay, all right. So far what we have seen is Arjuna's whole dilemma. And in verses 38 onwards, actually he starts a new set of arguments. So 31 to 37, he had one flow of arguments. Now 38 to around 34 to 44, again he starts a new set of arguments. And this new set of arguments, he's saying that, listen, they don't know what they're doing. The Kauravas, they don't know what they're doing because they're lobo pahata chetasaha in verse 38. They are overpowered by greed. They don't know what they're doing. But we who know what we're doing, shouldn't we then refrain from war? Because we know the great destruction that war can actually bring. And what can war bring? Kulakshaya. It can destroy families. And so he says, we're seeing it, so why don't we refrain from war? Then he goes on to expand what he means by destruction of family. And he says, listen, family is not just people coming together. Family is a fabric of society. It's a lineage of tradition, of custom, of rituals. And all those dharmas, family dharmas, values, they reside in a dharmi. They reside in a person. Now, when you break that family apart and when you lose people, you lose all the knowledge that they have. You lose all the values that they're going to pass on. So by the destruction of dharmi, by the destruction of people, dharma will be lost. And he said, then adharma will arise. What do you mean adharma will arise? He said, listen, women will be harmed in this kind of society because, for one, losing millions of men will create such an imbalance that women now will have to, will have to mother and father their children, will have to raise their children basically on their own. And that can be so hard. It can be so hard upon them because to bring everything together, to nourish a child and then to work and then for one person to do everything, it's so difficult. And that child will also miss out on having that other parent with the child. So this society is very difficult. And if women want to remarry, it's hard for them to find someone who's their match because there's so few men, there's so many women. So where's the guarantee that they will actually find someone that they're compatible with, that they can be with, that has the same background as them, has the same vision as them? It's going to be very hard. And so this Varna Sankaraha will happen. So what he means here is this. He means here that, look, you destroy the dharmi, you destroy the person, the dharma goes. It goes. Now, with this dharma, so many other dharmas, it's so many dharmas go, and it's elaborated in verse 43 or 44. We will see those words, but I'll explain to you now because it comes in context. One dharma that goes is called kula dharma, which we have seen. So those values that every family has. And every family has special traditions and customs that they do. And so that whole thing will go. Kula dharma. Then what we also have is, not only that, ashrama dharma will go. That grahastha ashrama, that ashrama for householders, that will break apart. That will break apart because now, there is no more husband. A wife might have lost her husband. So that very ashrama will break, that grahastha ashrama. And in our society, grahastha is actually that which holds all the other ashramas. It holds brahmacharya, it holds vanaprastha, and definitely sannyasa because, brahmacharya, vanaprastha, and sannyasa, they depend on grahasthas. So grahasthas are the ones who actually make society, who build society, who pump up wealth and into the economy. So imagine if you break this ashrama, society will become weak. So ashrama dharmas will break. Not only ashrama dharmas, but varna dharma, or what we call jati dharma, where in the Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, because let's say if I'm raising my child on my own, and let's say my jati dharma or my varna dharma is to be an educator, let's say, to be an educator, to be in school, to be in the field of disseminating knowledge. But listen, if I have a family to raise on my own, I can't think about my jati dharma. I just have to think about the quickest way to make money. So that jati dharma also will go. So you have your kula dharma will go. You have your ashrama dharma, that will also go in society. You have your jati dharma, that will also go. So all of these dharmas that hold society, dharma also means that which integrates, that which holds together, that which holds society together, that very dharma will collapse. So how can we consider such a thing? This is what he says. So this Varna Sankaraha means this. There's this admixture of different kinds of backgrounds, of different kinds of professions, of different kinds of personalities. And sometimes this can cause confusion, right? And that's why people tend to look for this person with the same kind of personality. So he said this can cause confusion in society. And those beautiful kula dharmas, family dharmas that we have, like Pindodaka kriyaha, like of shraddha, offering that pinda, those rice balls and water to the departed. Those beautiful traditions we have, nobody will do it. Nobody will offer shraddha anymore because there's nobody to offer shraddha. And when we don't offer that, then the ancestors won't be benefited. So he says all of these things we will really miss out on. And then further, so this is the argument that he's building. In verses 43, so in verse 43, that's where he says, listen, these by the evil deeds of the destroyers of the family, kulagnana, by the evil deeds of the destroyers of the family, which cause this confusion and admixture of all the varnas, the kula dharma perishes, the ashrama dharma, the jati dharma, all of these things, they perish. What will our society look like? You're saying go to war to protect dharma, but I feel like going to war is destroying dharma. And this is Arjuna just speaking his mind, because his name is Arjuna. Arjuna means the one who's very straightforward. Arjava was very straightforward. So he speaks his mind to Lord Krishna. And finally, in 44, he said, listen, O Janardana, means you, I know Janardana, you are the destroyer of the wicked. This is Lord Krishna's name, Janardana, the destroyer of the wicked. What happens is, Utsanna kula dharmanam manushyana. Utsanna here means destroyed. So in whose families the dharmas are destroyed, I have heard, he said, Anushushrama, I have heard aniyatam narake vasa, that they dwell in hell for long periods of time. So in those families where dharma is destroyed, they go to hell. They dwell in hell. So Arjuna says, I don't want to be part of this. I don't want to be involved in all of this. And when we say hell in our culture, Puja Gurudev says very beautifully, hell and heaven are states of mind. We don't need to die to experience heaven or hell. We can experience them here and now. And when he's saying that it will cause hell, here itself it will be hell. That suffering, that grief, that torture that we feel, that is called hell. And when the mind is at peace and at ease, that is called heaven. So hell and heaven, from one standpoint, are states of mind. So they will experience this kind of hellish state of mind. They will experience this kind of torture, this suffering. Do we really want to be part of that? After the body dies, in our Shastras, it is also said that there are realms of existence, what we call lokas, realms of existence. And there are 14 such lokas. Some are upper realms of existence, some are lower realms of existence. So it is also said that there are these planes of existence which are hellish or heavenly. And once the body drops, then it goes wherever it has to go according to its karma and then according to its vasana. And if it's mixed punya and papa, mixed good and bad, then it will come to earth again and take birth. So Arjuna is saying, really, Lord Krishna, I don't want to be part of this. This is what he's saying. He's building up this argument. Now in verses 45 to 47, he's concluding his standpoint. So let us see how he concludes his thoughts. So verse number 45. Aho batamahat papam kartum vyavasita vayam.
Aho batamahat papam kartum vyavasita vayam.
Yadraja sukhalobhena hantum swajanamudyataha.
Yadrajya sukhalobhena hantum swajanam mudyataha.
Aho batamahat papam kartum vyavasita vayam yadraja sukhalobhena hantum swajana mudyataha. So he says, aho, aho bata means alas, it's like, oh my gosh, like look at all of this right in front of me, like, oh my goodness. He says, vayam, we, vyavasitaha, we are determined to do, kartum, to do mahat papam, a great sin here. We are resolving, we have determined, we have resolved to do a great sin. And he says, Yat Rajya Sukha Lobhena, out of greed, lobha, out of greed for the sukha, for the pleasures of a kingdom. We are here we are resolved to do a great sin out of greed for pleasures of a kingdom. And udyataha, we are prepared, hantum swajanam, we are prepared, udyataha, to hantum, to kill swajanam, our very own people. So he says, look at this. This is really, really, what kind of state are we going to be in? We are going to do this and harm our own people. How can we how can we live with ourselves? So again here, in this very verse, what we see is Arjuna has lost sight of the entire thing. He lost vision. Again here, there's the hint of losing vision. Because here he says, out of greed for the pleasures of the kingdom. Oh, who says that you're fighting for the pleasures of the kingdom? So whenever we lose our vision, whenever we lose our sense of purpose, we become confused. We become distraught. We become depressed. We become unsure. Whenever we will notice in our lives, whenever we are struggling with, should I do this? Should I not do this? Should I go here? Should I not go there? Why are those decisions so hard to make? Those decisions are so hard to make because there's no vision. If the vision or the purpose is very clear, decisions would be so easy. This is the vision of my life. This is the purpose of my life. If it is in line with that, then let me go for it. And if it is not in line with that, then why go for it? So here Arjuna lost his vision completely. And this is indicated by the word Yad Raja Sukha Lobhena. Again, he lost his vision and he says, Hantum Swajanam Ahave. So, Hantum Swajanam Udyataha. He says, again, we are killing our own people. Again, this I and mine comes in. So what makes us confused is lack of vision. That's number one. Whenever we're confused, know that it's because we forgot our purpose and we forgot our vision. And so we have to come back to the drawing board and sit down and say, why are we here? And number two, whenever there's going to be me and mine, I, you and yours, there's going to be confusion. There's going to be confusion because there's always going to be something that you want to happen, something that you think should happen, something that you secretly desire, which is or could be contrary or contradictory to the vision. This is the vision, but whenever you put the word, but I kind of want to do this, or I'm thinking of doing this, then one will become very clouded in their thinking. So this is all that's happening in Arjuna's personality. This is not only Arjuna's personality, this happens in our personality. So he says, I don't want to be part of this great sin. So again, great sin. Now, he's lost what sin means. He's lost the meaning of it. And we've explored it. Sin means whenever we're walking away from God, whenever we're walking away from truth, whenever we're walking away from that goal of divinity, or we act against divinity, that's called sin. So he thinks he's confused. He thinks this is a fight for greed, for pleasure, out of greed for pleasure. He thinks that it is his own kinsman that's making him confused. He's lost the context of what sin is. There's so many things happening in his mind. And, in the footnote, Gurudev says in Bhishma Parva, Arjuna speaks very differently. And so I'm going to read a little bit of how Arjuna's attitude was. So, in Mahabharata, in Bhishma Parva, this whole war, this whole Bhagavad Gita takes place in Bhishma Parva, and it's actually called Bhagavad Gita Parva. So that inside that Bhishma Parva, there's Bhagavad Gita Parva. And before the Bhagavad Gita is given, there's a dialogue between Arjuna and Yudhishthira. And Yudhishthira, it says here that he sees the vast army and he becomes overwhelmed with grief. And he tells Arjuna, he says, "O mighty armed hero, O Dhananjaya, how shall we be able to fight with Dhritarashtra's son's army when the grandfather himself commands it?" This is Yudhishthira speaking. He's full of grief. He's asking Dhananjaya, Arjuna, how should we fight? And Arjuna replies, and I won't read you the whole thing. I'll just read you the very essential shlokas of his reply. He says, "They that are desirous of victory do not conquer by might and prowess, as by truth, compassion, and virtue." So those that will be victorious are the ones that conquer by compassion, by piety, by virtue, by truth. And he says, knowing, tyaktva adharmam. He says, having left adharma, lobham, having left greed, moham, having left delusion. He says, having left all of this, he says, therefore, yudyadvam, fight. He's telling this to Yudhishthira. Please see the words that he's using. All these words that he said, now he's very confused. He's having let go of adharma, having let go of greed, of moha, yudyadvam anahankara. You fight without ego. And he says, yato dharmas tato jaya. Where there is dharma, there is victory. Now see Arjuna. So there he said, this is what he says. And he says, evam rajan vijanihi. Therefore, Rajan, O Yudhishthira, vijanihi, please know, dhruvaha asmakam rane jayaha. Dhruva, it's certain that in this battlefield, rane asmakam jayaha, we will win. Yathatu Narada praha. Narada said, just as Narada said, Yataha Krishnas tato jayaha. Wherever there is Krishna, there is victory. So it means that Arjuna knew. He knew. But in this very situation, when he saw the Kauravas, specifically Bhishma and Drona, he felt very overwhelmed. Now continuing, what else does Arjuna say? Now verse number 46. Yadi mama pratikaram
Yati mama pratikaram
ashastram shastrapanayah
ashastram shastrapanayah
dhartarashtrarane hanyuhu
dhartarashtrarane hanyuhu
tanme kshemataram bhavet
tanme kshemataram bhavet
yadi mama pratikaram ashastram shastrapanayah dhartarashtrarane hanyuhu tanme kshemataram bhavet. So he says here, yadi, if dhartarashtraha, Dhartarashtraha means the sons of Dhritarashtra. The sons of Dhritarashtra are called Dhartarashtraha. Shastraparnayaha. If those sons of Dhritarashtra with the weapons in their hand, Shastraparnaya, Pani means hand, so Shastraparnaya, if they, Hanyuhu, if they shall slay, Hanyuhu shall slay, Rane, in the battlefield, who? Mam, me. If they shall slay me, and what am I like? Apratikara. I'm unresisting. I'm defenseless. I'm not going to fight back. If they shall slay me, who is apratikara, and I'm not resisting at all. And he says, ashastra, and without weapons. If they slay me without weapons, tat me kshemataram bhavet. For me, tat me kshemataram. That is far better than war. Now imagine how Arjuna completely changed. How he came in the picture, very ready to fight, telling Lord Krishna, commanding him, bring me in the middle, and I want to see who I have to fight. Now he's ready to surrender. He said, if they slay me without any weapons, without any, and I won't even fight back, that's far better. Just don't ask me to fight this war. I don't want to fight, Lord Krishna. I just don't want to do it. It's Arjuna's condition. And finally now, what does he look like? What does he look like? What happens to him? What's his picture? So now Vedavyasa ji brings back Sanjaya, because we know Sanjaya is narrating this to Dhritarashtra. He brings back Sanjaya to describe Arjuna's status, Arjuna's condition. Sanjaya uvacha.
Sanjaya uvacha.
Evam muktvarjuna sankhye.
Evam muktvarjuna sankhye.
Rathopastha upavishat.
Ratopastha upavishat.
Visrijasa sharam chapam.
Visrijasa sharam chapam.
Shoka samvigna manasaha.
Shoka samvigna manasaha.
Sanjaya uvacha. Evam muktvarjuna sankhye. Rathopastha upavishat. Visrijasa sharam chapam. Shoka samvigna manasaha. So now Sanjaya is painting this picture for Dhritarashtra. He says, Evam, in this way that we have, in all of the verses that we have seen, in this way, examining Arjuna's condition, what happens? This Arjuna, Uktva, having said this, having spoken this Arjuna, what did he do? Sankhye. Sankhye means in this battlefield, Rathopasthe. This word should be, it is Rathopasthe, but when you do the Sandhi, it becomes Rathopastha. In the battlefield, in the seat of the chariot, Upavishat. It means he is in his chariot, in the battlefield, in the seat of his chariot. And if you're in your chariot, you're supposed to be standing. You're supposed to be ready for war. You're supposed to be ready to go. Upavishat. He sat down. Visrija. And what did he do? He cast away. He dropped. Earlier, his Gandiva, his bow was slipping. Now Visrija completely cast away. He cast away Sasharam Chapam. Chapam here means his bow, Sasharam, along with the arrows. He just dropped it. And what was his condition? Shoka samvigna manasaha. Manasaha, his mind, samvigna. was overwhelmed with sorrow. This is Arjuna's condition. So, having spoken in the middle of the battlefield, Arjuna just sat down, dropped his bow, dropped his arrow, filled with, overpowered by sorrow. So, this is chapter 1. So, what are we seeing in chapter 1? So, first, let us sort of go through a little bit of chapter 1, then we will read the concluding verse. How did chapter 1 really start, right? How did it all happen? So it started with Dhritarashtra's question. Dhritarashtra's question that in this Dharma Kshetra, in this Kurukshetra, Dharma Kshetre, Kurukshetre, Samaveta Yutsavaha, where all of them were gathered. Mamakaha, Pandavascheva, Kimakurvata Sanchaya, where my people were there and where the Pandavas were there. What exactly happened? So we said that the first verse, that's already a wrong misstatement. It's a wrong way to question from a king. A king is supposed to have that overall vision of whoever is in the kingdom. But the very fact that he says, what happened to my people versus the Pandavas, already it starts with a wrong question from Dhritarashtra's side. And we had seen in that first verse how attachment can make us blind. Attachment to somebody can make us blind. It can make us really do adharma because we're so intent on pleasing this person. We see this person as an object of our happiness. He saw Duryodhana as an object of his happiness. Therefore, all he wanted to do was please Duryodhana. Do everything for Duryodhana because that was his happiness. And he was afraid of losing Duryodhana. So when we become attached, we lose our judgment, we become afraid, and therefore we start doing adharma. Attachment yields or brings adharma. And a lot of this was Dhritarashtra. A lot of this was Dhritarashtra because he didn't say anything. And what's one of the really interesting things I read in Mahabharata, I was reading yesterday. In that Draupadi, where her sari was, Dushasana was pulling her sari, they were questioning, if somebody doesn't speak up when they see something wrong, are they at fault? If in front of you, you see wrong things are happening, but you don't say anything, are you at fault? In our Shastra says, you are at fault. And there's one verse there in Sanskrit. I'm going to just see if I can pull it up because it was very nice. I shared it with our junior chicks. Some thought, some food for thought. So give me a moment. I'll see if I can pull it up because this is what Dhritarashtra is going through. All right, here we go. I want to share that quote. Here. Here it says, Ardham harati vaishreshtaha pado bhavati kartrishu padascheva sabhasatsu ye nindanti ninditam. It means when in an assembly, and this is any situation, not just an assembly, in any situation where a censurable act is not rebuked, half the demerit of that act goes to the head of the assembly. 1/4 to the person who acts censurably and 1/4 to all who are present there. So you can just see the one who did the wrong act, they only get 1/4 of the demerit. Huh? They only get 1/4 of the demerit. The 1/2 of the demerit goes to the head of the assembly, because it is in their presence they have that dharma to stop it, but they don't. So Dhritarashtra is being silent to this. And very nice here also I'll share with you. Janan vibruvan prashnan kamat krodhat bhayat tatha sahasram varunan pashan atmani pratimuchati. The one who knows Janan vibruvan prashnan but doesn't answer the question, because kamat, out of desire, means they want something from that person, so they're not going to speak against that person. Krodhat, out of anger, or bhayat, or they're afraid. Sahasram varunan, they bring upon themselves 1,000 pashas, 1,000 weapons of varuna, and they cannot be released from that. And it says in our Shastra, it takes 1 year to be released from that. Here we go. Tasya samvatsare purne pasha ekaha pramuchyate. Means of that person, 1 whole year it takes for that pasha to be loosened from them. Tasmat satyam tu vaktavyam janata satyam anjasa. Therefore, one should speak the truth without concealment. So you see, it's very, very interesting where Dhritarashtra is. 1/2 of the whole fault is his. So it opens like this. This is what we see in chapter 1. Then we see verses, first we see the Kaurava Paksha, because Dhritarashtra asks first, Mamaka. So we see the Kaurava Paksha, and that we see in verses 2 to verses 13. So we saw verses 2 to verses 13 was the Kaurava Paksha, where Duryodhana was really going to Drona and telling Drona all of these people who he's fighting against. Just see Duryodhana's mind, instead of going to his guru to seek blessings, he's going to his guru and telling him all of the people in the Pandava army, all of what's going on. He speaks, he's afraid. So many things are going on in his mind. And because he's afraid, he uses very indiscriminate words. And so Bhishma says, this guy, in order to boost him up, we have to do something, because when somebody's insecure, like we saw Duryodhana, they speak up so much, they talk so much because they're so insecure. They try to pull themselves up. So Bhishma says, enough of this, and he blows his conch. And so the Kauravas start the war. Then we saw the Pandava Paksha. So Pandava Paksha, and the first part, Paksha means side. The first entrance in the Pandava side was Madhava and Arjuna. Madhava, Lord Krishna, and Arjuna. And it described how they were in their beautiful chariot with divine horses, with Hanumanji in their flags. And then it goes to describe the different conches that everybody is playing, and these conches really reverberated in the air, and it broke the hearts of the Kauravas. It just shattered them. Then we saw Arjuna instructing Lord Krishna, place me there in the middle of the battlefield so I may see who I'm going to fight with. So we see all of this until verse number 26. Then what happens is 27 and 28 is really where 27, 28, 29, 30. These verses are where we see Arjuna's complete breakdown. So we see that in verse 28 specifically, Kripaya Paraya Vishtaha, this thing of misplaced compassion. That compassion where it should not be. Right now, you have to perform your dharma. It's fine to feel, to be with the others, but right now there's a dharma to perform, and that compassion is misplaced. It is coming at the wrong time in the wrong context. And we saw Arjuna, Sidanti Mama Gatrani, how his whole entire, his limbs, they fail him. His mouth gets dry and he's shaking and his hair's standing and his Gandiva's slipping. And then, of course, 31 to 37, we see his arguments as that I don't want any pleasures, any kingdom, any power in this life, and I don't want heavenly realms in the next life. And we saw the mistake in his arguments where it's not about you, Arjuna, it's about dharma. And finally, we saw now in 38 to 44 how he brought out such a compelling argument that the whole family dharma will collapse. And so therefore, he doesn't want to fight. He doesn't want to be part of this whole thing. And from 45 to 47, we saw what happens to that Arjuna, the complete change of his personality. Now, what's so interesting about Arjuna is he doesn't leave the chariot. He doesn't leave the chariot. He breaks down in the chariot. He drops his weapons in the chariot. He sits down, but he doesn't leave the chariot. He doesn't leave the chariot because he knows there must be something more. Why Lord Krishna is not speaking up? What else has he got to say? Why am I not hearing a reply from him? So in his heart, he knows there could be something more. And in his life, he has always sought the advice, the counsel of Lord Krishna. So here is Arjuna broken down, but yet the beauty of Arjuna is he's open. He's open and he's just waiting for Lord Krishna. And how Lord Krishna answers Arjuna, all of the answers to Arjuna, that comes in the second chapter. So now let us conclude together the first chapter, and we will see the meaning of the concluding verse and how beautiful that journey was. Om Tat Saditi
Om Tat Saditi
Srimad Bhagavad Gitasu
Srimad Bhagavad Gitasu
Upanishatsu
Upanishatsu
Brahma Vidyayam
Brahma Vidyayam
Yoga Shastre
Yoga Shastre
Shri Krishna Arjuna Samvade
Shri Krishna Arjuna Samvade
Arjuna Vishada Yogo Nama
Arjuna Vishada Yogo Nama
Prathamodhyayaha.
Prathamodhyayaha.
Om Tat Saditi Srimad Bhagavad Gitasu Upanishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Shri Krishna Arjuna Samvade Arjuna Vishada Yogo Nama Prathamodhyayaha. So, in every chapter, at the end of every chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, it concludes with a verse like this. Om. Om, that one reality. Tat Sat. Tat means that. Sat, that reality. Iti Srimad Bhagavad Gita. This Bhagavad Gita, Gita Su, in this Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita means the song of the Lord. In this song of the Lord, Upanishatsu, which is an Upanishad, because it is the essence of the Upanishads. Remember, Sarvo Panishado Gavaha. In that Gita Dhyanam, which we chant, we say Sarvo Panishado Gavaha. If all of the Upanishads were cows, then what happens? Sarvo Panishado Gavaha Dogda Gopala Nandanaha. And the milker of that is Lord Krishna. And the calf is Partha. and the milk is Bhagavad Gita. So very, very beautiful. Bhagavad Gita, the essence of the Upanishads. So it says Upanishatsu. And what is this essence? Brahma Vidyayam means in the knowledge of Brahman, in the knowledge of reality. Yoga Shastre, and it is not only knowledge of Brahman or knowledge of the truth, it is a Yoga Shastra, means it tells you practical ways to get to the truth. So it's not only this deep philosophical knowledge, the Bhagavad Gita is also very practical. So it's a Yoga Shastra. Yoga means that which unites you with the higher, that which helps you unfold. So in this Yoga Shastra, in this samvada means this dialogue between Sri Krishna and Arjuna, Arjuna Vishada Yogo Nama. This chapter is named Arjuna Vishada Yoga, the yoga of Arjuna's grief, Prathamodhyaya, the first chapter. Now, why is this named the yoga of Arjuna's grief? So one is because this whole chapter was a journey of Arjuna's grief, how he became a master of the situation, he transformed to become a victim, completely transformed. But also to show how grief is also a yoga. Grief has the ability to unite us to the higher. Sometimes when we feel sad, when we feel exhausted, when we feel stressed, tensed, disturbed, take a moment to feel that grief. In our culture, grief is not something we're afraid of. Grief is something that we feel, we embrace, and we accept. Because in that grief, it makes us seek deeper. In that grief, it makes us think, why are we here? Why are we doing this? Why are we going through this? It makes us pause. But we have to be really courageous to do it. I think it was Kunti Devi who prayed to Lord Krishna saying, give me more grief so that I think about you. Isn't it? That's her prayer. That's her prayer. So grief is not something we shy away from. Just how Arjuna was so open about his grief, he felt it. He felt it so fully. He described it. He told Lord Krishna about it. And in that grief, he becomes a seeker. So the same with us. Yes, grief has the ability to pin us down, to pull us down, to break us. But grief also has the ability to make us. If we, like Arjuna, can take that moment or moments of grief and really reflect, why are we going through it? What's happening? Should I pause in my life? Is too much going on? What's really important? Why am I here? Feel that grief. It's totally okay. Feel it. Feel it. Go through it. But mostly grow through it. And this is what happens to Arjuna. We will only grow through our grief if we let ourselves feel it. Many times we try to hide it. We try to cover it up. We try to deny that it's actually there. But what we can learn from Arjuna is his honesty. To whatever's inside, to bring it out and say, this is what it is. This is what I'm feeling. Now, what do I do? That's the beauty of Arjuna. Okay? So today we stop here. I won't start chapter 2 now, but today we will stop here. I will say the closing prayer, then I have some important announcements to make. Okay? Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। हरिः ॐ श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः। हरिः ॐ।